Hello, listener. I am glad you found your way back here. Put the day down. You don't need it anymore tonight. Come closer to the fire. There is a story waiting, somewhere quiet enough to finally sleep. And if the story kept you company tonight, there is a chair here for you whenever you want to come back. Subscribe only if you feel it was worth the climb. No obligation. The fire will be kept either way. Somewhere tonight, a lantern is burning for you. The first thing I noticed was the ceiling, or rather, what has replaced it. From the single dark beam that runs the width of this room hangs everything. Herb bundles the color of old river mud, tied with rough twine and gone dry as paper. So much lavender that the whole upper room smells of it, a sweetness that has gone down past sweet, past pleasant, into something older and more serious, something very close to sleep. Dried oranges threaded on cord, their skins gone deep amber, their scent all warm and turned. Garlic braids. Roots with their long pale fingers trailing nearly to head height, swaying at their tips. The handles of wooden implements I cannot name turning slowly in the rising warmth from the fire. Sprigs of something small and grey. Ivy threading through everything, living and indifferent, finding every gap. If you looked up in this room, the ceiling is not what you would find. What you would find is 40 years of craft and preparation hanging together in the dark, all of it moving slightly, slowly, breathing in the warmth that rises from the fire below. The shelves to my left are no better. Bottles dark with old glass, crowded together so tightly I cannot see what is behind them, some clear, some the color of pond water in autumn, some of a red so deep it reads as black unless the firelight finds them right, which it does now and then briefly, turning them briefly to something alive. Books stacked flat on the upper shelf, their spines too dark to read. A mortar the size of a cooking pot, things in jars, a coil of rope, a copper something half hidden. To my right, on a table under the window, a grimoire lies open, its pages bent back and soft with use, a half-melted candle beside it standing in its own cold wax. Further back, a spinning wheel still, a woven basket overflowing onto the floor, more candles clustering along every ledge, their wax dripping slow. And in the center of the room, between me and the fire, on the warm flagstones where the heat pools deepest, the cauldron. It is wide and iron black, and it sits on 3 legs above an open fire, and the fire is not small. It is doing something. I want to be precise about that. The cauldron has been doing something since before I arrived, and it has not paused for my entrance, and it will not pause when I leave. The smoke steam, I should say, though it has more substance to it than the word usually implies, rises from it in thick coiling columns, one and then another, each making a slow, deliberate spiral upward to the beam and beyond, where it thins and spreads and becomes the air of the room, becomes the smell of it, becomes the warmth that keeps pressing on my face like a held hand. The spoon turns. Around and around in the same patient direction it has always turned, with no hand to guide it. 11 years, the man at the door told me. Don't trouble yourself over it. It troubles no one. There is a cat. She is easy to miss. I want to be honest about that. She is small and dark, and curled so tightly she has nearly become nothing. A comma of black fur on the warm stone directly below the cauldron's heat, her nose tucked under her tail, her edges glowing amber where the firelight finds her. If I had not been looking for her specifically, I think I could have sat here an hour without noticing. But the man said, there is a cat. So I looked and found her, and felt, in that instant, and without any reason I can justify, completely safe. A room with a sleeping cat is a room where nothing bad is happening. Every person who has ever kept a cat knows this. You feel it before you can think it. A cat that has chosen a spot and settled into it has made a judgment about the room. It has decided the room is fine. I trust that judgment more tonight than I trust my own. Sleep then, sleep, little one. I should tell you about the window. It is tall and arched, set into the right wall, and through its old glass the moor outside is visible under a blue-dark sky. The green of the grass just barely there in what must be moonlight, the land flat and going nowhere in all directions, the sky above it deep and cold. That much is ordinary. What is beyond the glass? I noticed it and said nothing to the man, because it seemed impolite to point and ask. Two shapes hang in the dark outside. Not quite shapes. Not quite anything I have a good word for. They are soft and cold and blue-white, barely more luminous than the sky behind them. Two gathered presences, like held breath given a loose form, suspended there just past the glass, drifting with the particular unhurriedness of things that are in no hurry because they have nowhere else to be. They are the color of the spaces between stars. They are not looking in. They are not looking at anything I can determine. They are simply near. I have decided not to think about them. The man at the door left me a cup of something warm. It is in my hands now, pale clay, rough at the rim, good and plain, and the warmth of it goes all the way up my arms. He left a second small pot warming on the stones by the fire. I have my satchel against the chair leg and my chart folded inside it. The empty parts of the map are waiting. They are always waiting. The empty parts of the map are the one patient thing in my life. But the man said one other thing before he went, and I have been sitting with it since. The way you sit with a stone you found on a path that is the wrong shape to be a natural stone. He said it is a returning night tonight. In Greywend, the dead come back. The newly gone just for the one night to finish the small thing they left undone. They come in through the dark and they go out through the dark. And this room, the workshop, the cauldron, the cat, is where they pass. Every one of them. But nothing goes wrong in here, he said. She sees to that. You sleep easy. And then he went and shut the door and left me alone with the fire and the turning spoon and the lavender and the shapes past the glass and a small dark cat who has not stirred since I arrived. I have a cup of warm in my hands. I have a story to tell. I am going to tell it to you, little one, in the warm, while the cauldron does whatever it does, and the night does whatever it does. And when it is over, we will both have made it to the morning. It begins with a woman who decided death was not the problem. You have to understand what Greywend was before it became what it is now. Not the warm thing it is tonight. The town where the dead come back gently, where the workshop keeps its door open and its fire lit. I mean the older version, the afraid version. The one the oldest people in the valley still sometimes describe in the careful, where you describe things that have stopped being true but haven't stopped being real. In that older Greywend, the dead came back wrong. Not cruel. I want to be clear, because the word wrong does a lot of work when you say it about the dead, and I do not mean it the way it first sounds. They came back as themselves, which was the trouble. A woman who died on a Tuesday came back that night exactly as she had been on Monday. Same face, same voice, same gestures, the same particular way she tilted her head when she was listening. She came back whole. She came back expecting everything to be the same as it had been. She came back with Monday's plans still in her hands, not understanding that the world had moved on without her into a Tuesday she was no longer part of. That is the wound, and it is harder to treat than fear. A ghost that means to frighten you can be bargained with. A woman who simply does not understand that she has died and is still trying to finish the week she had planned, that is something else. That is grief that hasn't been told what it is yet. And love that doesn't know it has ended will reach the way love does. It will reach for the warm thing it was reaching for before. It will try to hold what it always held. It will try with great tenderness to take what it loves with it into the dark, not to harm it, to keep it. Because it cannot imagine, has never had to imagine, going anywhere without it. A town where that happens unguarded is a town that learns to dread its own dead. It bars the door on returning nights and lies awake listening to footsteps on the path that have no business being there. It holds its grief all day and then is afraid of its grief at night. It loves someone all their life, and then, the night after the burial, flinches at the sound of their name said in the dark. Look at the steam a moment, the way it rises and turns. That is what I see when I think about the Greywend that was. Something that should be simple, grief, the most ordinary thing, becoming something that coils and does not disperse. The pressure of all that love with nowhere to go. Hush, little one, I'm getting to the better part. Settle. Into that afraid town. A long time ago, longer than the oldest living person can quite remember, though not so long the story has worn smooth. There came a woman the town would remember as Sailor. Whether that was the name she brought with her or the name they gave her, the old woman who told it to me at her well 3 valleys east could not say for certain. She said it might matter and might not, and she was probably right on both. The ordinary things about Sailor were these. She kept this workshop at the edge of the houses where the moor begins. She knew herbs. She set bones. She sat with the sick. She was the one they fetched on the hard nights, the fever that wouldn't break, the breathing that had gone strange, the arrival that was taking too long. The one thing that was not ordinary about her was this. On returning nights, when every other door in Greywend was barred, and every lamp turned down, and every window shuttered, Sailor left hers open. At first the town thought her reckless, then lucky. It took years to understand what she was actually doing. She was sitting up, all night, every returning night, by this fire with this door open, so the confused dead who wandered the town would find their way, the way all confused things find their way eventually, to the one room with the light in it. And she would talk to them. That is all. She would talk to them the way you talk to someone who has woken from a nightmare that isn't over yet, knowing that the most dangerous thing you can do is argue about whether it is real. She did not tell them they were dead. She helped them find the thing they had come back to finish. She helped them do it. And then, slowly, in the grey before dawn, she helped them understand that the thing was finished, that they could go now, that everything they loved would be, in the end, all right. And they would go, quietly, the way you finally sleep after a night of not being able to sleep, once someone you trust has come and sat beside you in the dark. The town began to leave its dead to her. Not in words, you do not say such things in words in Greywend, because to say them is to make them too real and too fragile at once. But in the way of small places, where everyone understands the thing no one says. When someone died, the family barred their own door and left Sailor's lamp burning. And for the first time in the memory of anyone living, Greywend slept through a returning night. All of them. Because one woman was awake, and the one woman was enough. She held that line for most of a long life. Which means there was an end to it coming. Which means there was a question no one wanted to say aloud. What happens to this town when the woman who holds the door is no longer able to hold it? And could a door, if you were willing to pay a certain kind of price, be made to hold itself? I want to tell you something about the magic they practice in this part of Shinri, because it will not make sense otherwise. It is not the bright, quick magic of the southern schools, where a thing can be done in a word, and the cost is a headache and a hungry morning. It is older and plainer, and it follows one rule that everyone north of the Cald knows from childhood. The rule is this: permanent work asks a permanent price, paid once, in full, up front, in something you cannot get back. You can borrow if what you need is temporary, pull a small power for a small while, and pay it back in tiredness the way you pay a hard day's walking in sore feet. That is borrowing. But if you want something to hold forever, past your own strength, past your own life, past memory itself, then the working has to be paid for with something that was truly and irreplaceably yours. The work knows the difference between what you can spare and what you cannot. It accepts only what you cannot. Sailor wanted to make a gate. That was the word she had arrived at, working it out alone over several difficult seasons. Not a guardian can die. Not a ward can be broken. A gate, a fixed and permanent threshold set into the very edge of what Greywend was, through which the dead could enter on their one night under proper guidance, complete their small thing, and be led out before the dawn. A thing that did not need courage or kindness or the decision to sit up again tonight. A thing that simply was the way through, and was that all the time, because being the way through was all it was. But here is the thing about becoming a gate. You cannot also be a person. The two conditions cannot share a life. A person sleeps, and a gate that sleeps is a gate that has swung shut, and a gate that swings shut on a returning night is the exact catastrophe Sailor had spent 40 years preventing. A person ages and grows tired and has bad nights and sometimes cannot do the thing that needs doing. A gate does none of that. A gate holds. That is its one job. It holds. She had written it down first, every part of it, not because she feared she would forget, but because she wanted to see it plainly on paper, what she was giving, what she was paying, what she was becoming, and what she was not. She read it twice. The old woman at the well said she was told that Sailor read it twice and then set it in the fire and watched it go, and only after the last of it had gone did she begin. The working took a night and a day and a night. She set the cauldron, this one, the one turning beside us, turning as it has turned for 11 years, and into it she put the binding that would keep the gate steady, season after season, the slow, long maintenance of a door held eternally open. She set the spoon turning, and she stepped into the working herself, and she paid the price. Her hands, her voice, her face, the whole soft mortal arrangement of being a woman who could choose to go, all of it given over and spent in exchange for something that would never need to choose and never need to go, because it would simply always be exactly here. When the working was done, there was no woman in the room. There was a cauldron that had not stopped turning, and there was a small black cat asleep on the warm stones at the center of the floor. Because that, the old woman said this very simply, the way you say the part of a thing that most needs to be said without decoration. That is the shape a gate takes when it is at its work but not actively being crossed, not sleeping, not resting, working. The way a door is not doing nothing when no one is walking through it. It is still being a door. It is holding the frame open. The stillness of a gate is not the stillness of a thing that has stopped. It is the stillness of a thing that has become the condition inside which other things can happen. A small black cat, curled so tight she is almost nothing, on the warm stone at the center of this room. I keep looking at her as I tell you this. I cannot help it. She hasn't moved in the hour I've been sitting here. Her breathing, what I can hear of it from this distance, is so slow and so even it barely registers. She is the most peaceful thing in a room full of motion. Everything else stirs. The steam turns. The fire shifts. The hanging things above me breathe. The shapes past the glass drift their cold blue drift, and she is still. Did you see that, the lavender bundle, third from the right? It went the wrong way, against the draft, as if something brushed past it going toward the door rather than away. I watched it swing and slow and correct itself. There was nothing between it and the door. There is nothing between it and the door. There is no one else in this room. I am telling myself, old rooms have complicated air, drafts that fold back on themselves, currents that run along the ceiling and come back low along the floor going the opposite direction. The bundle swung how it swung. The ripple in the cauldron went how it went. The shadow in the corner is a shadow. I am a tired man in a warm room on a wet night telling a story to a cat, and I am perfectly fine, and there is nothing strange happening in this room at all. I am going to keep telling myself this. It is a good thing to tell yourself. It is the kind of thought that fits the shape of the room very well, as long as you do not look at the cat's shadow too long. You would think a town would be loud about something like this. You would think it would build monuments, put her name somewhere permanent, teach children the shape of the sacrifice so they understand what is holding the world in place around them. Greywend is not loud about it. Greywend is the opposite. Greywend is so quiet about Sailor that if you arrived in the town and asked around for a few hours before you knew what to ask, you would not hear her name at all. You would hear the workshop at the edge, and the cat that's always been there, and the fire that's never gone fully out. And don't worry, it's a returning night, but nothing goes wrong in the workshop. It never does. You would hear the fact of her in pieces described by its effects. You would not hear the word witch, or the word magic, or the word sacrifice, unless you were asking the right kind of old woman at the right kind of well. This is the truest kind of remembering. The kind that has gone so deep it no longer needs to be said. The town does not talk about Sailor. The town simply keeps the fire from going cold, keeps the door unlatched on returning nights, brings things. Look at this room. I mean, really look at it. Not just the beauty of it, the bottles on the shelves, the grimoire open on the table, the lavender and the dried oranges and the garlic braids hung so thick you can barely see the beam they hang from. Look at the freshness. Some of those herb bundles are new. Someone hung them recently. You can still see the green in them, not yet fully dried. The candles along the shelf are not the same candles that were here 11 years ago. Someone has been replacing them. The grimoire on the table has been turned to a fresh page, carefully, by hands that knew which page to turn it to. The small pot of warm that was sitting by the fire when I arrived, the man told me he had not put it there. 11 years. Someone has been tending this room for 11 years, slipping in and out on quiet feet, asking nothing, saying nothing, leaving the milk and the fresh herbs and the replaced candles the way you leave something at a grave, except not a grave. Not a grave at all. Something between a shrine and a courtesy. Something that says, "We know you are still here. We know you are still working. We know there is no way for you to tell us you need anything. So we are going to assume you need what you always needed, and bring it, and leave it, and not ask for thanks, because thanks would require a voice, and a voice is what you gave." The cat's shadow just now, I was not going to mention it again, but I am going to mention it. I glanced at the wall behind her. The firelight throws her shadow up against the stone, and for a moment, a single moment before it corrected, the shadow was not the shape of a curled, sleeping cat. The shadow was upright. The shadow had its head turned toward the door. The shadow was the shape of something that was not, in any meaningful way, asleep. Then the fire shifted and the shadow settled back, and it was only a cat's shadow again, and she had not moved. I put my cup down on the arm of the chair. I picked it back up. I am still holding it. They are still out there, the shapes past the glass. Look at them. They have drifted closer to the window than they were an hour ago. Not pressing at the glass, still not that, but closer. And their light, that cold blue-white, that not quite luminescence, pulsed just now once together, the way two flames lean toward each other in the same gust of wind, and then dimmed, and now they are still again. The old woman at the well said, "In Greywend, the returns take the whole night sometimes. Some of the dead need longer. They come in and they sit, and they take their time arriving at the thing they need to do. The gate stays open until the last of them has passed back through before the dawn. The gate does not decide when it is done. The gate is done when the work is done. The work is not done yet. Sleep, little one. Sleep, sailor. I know that isn't quite the right word. I know now what sleep means in this room and what it doesn't. But I do not have another word for what you are doing, the way you are curled there on the warm stone, eyes closed, breathing, if that is breathing, in that long, slow rhythm that is very much like rest, and is also, apparently, not rest at all. I do not have a word for a gate that looks like a cat. I did not expect to need one. Here is the thing I keep returning to in the last part of this long night. The man told me when he was leaving, nothing goes wrong in here. She sees to it. And I thought he was speaking historically. I thought he meant, in the long years when the woman sailor was alive and awake and working, nothing went wrong. I thought he was talking about the past. He was not talking about the past. He was telling me, as plainly as anyone in Greywend ever tells anyone anything, that the gate is still held, that the work is still being done, that the cauldron still turns not because it is a charming relic, but because it is still the working, still turning, still keeping what it was set to keep. That the cat on the floor is not the ghost of a woman who died for this town. She is the woman, still here, still at it. And I have been sitting in her workshop, keeping her company, for the better part of this whole returning night. The rain has stopped. I noticed it happening slowly, the drizzle thinning, the patter on the old slate going intermittent and then gone. And in the silence after it, the room seems larger, the way rooms do when the sound that was filling them is removed. The fire is low, mostly embers now, ticking and settling in that particular end-of-night way. The way a fire has when it has done most of what it came to do and is simply finishing. The steam has changed too, still rising but slower, thinner. The thick coiling columns that filled the upper room all night have gone slender, the way a river narrows near its source, the working winding down or winding up toward something, I cannot tell which. The shapes past the window glass, I can just barely see them, in the blue before the blue becomes grey, in the last of the cold, dark hour. They are very dim now, very still, as if the things that needed to be done tonight have, quietly and without fanfare, been done. And then the spoon stopped. I want to be precise about this too, because precision is what it deserves. The spoon, which has been turning since 11 years before I arrived, and was turning when I sat down, and had been turning all through every chapter of the story I have been telling. It came around one last slow time, and slowed and stopped. Perfectly still, standing upright in the middle of the cauldron's surface, which had gone, in that same moment, perfectly still as well. And the steam stopped, entirely, nothing rising, nothing turning. The room, for the first time all night, entirely without motion. And I looked into the cauldron, in the grey of what was now almost dawn, and the liquid that had been dark and slow and working all night had cleared. Clear as water from a good well. Clear as nothing. as if the whole long night had been one careful preparation for this, for the moment when the working was, finally, finished. And she sat up. Not the way a cat wakes. Not that slow stretch, that theatrical yawn, that long blink of indifference that cats perform to let you know they were not actually asleep. They were simply thinking with their eyes shut. Nothing like that. She sat up the way you sit up after a very long piece of work when the work is over, not a movement of waking, a movement of completion. Upright all at once, on the warm stone at the center of the floor, in the grey light, with the cleared cauldron behind her and the stilled spoon, and the silence of a room where something has finished. And she turned, and she looked at me. I have been looked at by a great many things in a great many places in my years of walking the empty parts of the map. I have been looked at by creatures that were deciding whether to approach, and creatures that were deciding whether to run. I have been looked at with hunger, and with wariness, and with the mild, distant curiosity of things that see too many travelers to be impressed by any of them. She looked at me the way none of those things looked at me. She looked at me with the full attention of someone who has been in the same room as me all night, who has heard every word I said, who knows the exact cadence of my voice and the specific weight of my pauses, who knows me in that particular way, that intimate, involuntary way, that you only know someone you have spent a long night beside in the dark. Her eyes caught the last of the ember light, two small steady points of green and amber, and she held my gaze without moving, without blinking, with the complete and unhurried recognition of a person who has been waiting patiently for me to understand. And I understood everything at once, the way you understand a thing your whole body has been quietly assembling all night without letting your mind know. The door in its frame, giving softly all those times, the weight across the stone floor light as thought, the chair that turned slightly as if something paused beside it, the ripple going the wrong way across the cauldron's surface, the herb bundle swinging against the draught, the shadow that was not the shape of a sleeping cat. All night, the dead of Greywend had come in through the dark and crossed this floor and done their small things and gone back out through the dark. And I had been here, in the warm, in the middle of it, sleeping between my open eyes, and nothing had touched me, and nothing had come near me, and nothing had reached for me in the dark the way that young husband had reached, without malice, for what he loved and could not leave. Because the gate was held, because the gate had been here at the center of the room the whole long night, working, because the small dark shape on the warm stone that I had taken for a sleeping cat had not been asleep for one single moment of this entire night. And I thought then about every tender nothing I had said into the quiet of this room, every sleep, little one, every I won't wake you, every you've heard this one before, haven't you? Every soft murmured aside that a tired man says to a sleeping cat, thinking himself alone, thinking himself unheard. The whole long solitary performance of a man talking to an animal, because talking to an animal is the closest thing to talking to no one, which is the only way some thoughts can be spoken aloud. I had not been talking to an animal. I had been talking to Sailor all night, every word. The woman who gave up her voice so a town could sleep, who has sat at the center of this room for 11 years, returning night after returning night, meeting the dead and guiding the dead, and never ever getting to say, "I hear you. I am here. I know." Who cannot say thank you for the milk and the fresh herbs and the replaced candles. Who cannot say, "I noticed you sat with me tonight. I noticed you talked. It helped." Cannot say anything to anyone ever. Except she looked at me, and I understood. That was saying something. I had nothing to give her. A mapmaker carries almost nothing, and what he carries he needs. But the cup was in my hands, good plain clay, warm still from the long night of holding, and it was mine, and it was all I had, and so I got up slowly and crossed the room to the cauldron, and I set the cup down on the warm stones beside it, beside her. She looked at it, she looked at me, and she blinked once slow, the particular way a cat blinks at something it has decided to trust, which is the closest a cat comes to saying yes, and she turned, and she took the 2 small steps back to the center of the floor, to the warmest stone, to the exact place a door would stand if a door could choose to stand anywhere. And she curled herself down, and she tucked her nose under, and she closed her eyes. Not sleeping, holding, as she always has, as she always will. I walked to the door. I did not look back. It seemed like the right thing not to look back. The door opened at a touch, the way it always does, the way a door does when the thing holding it has wanted you to go and is making it easy. The moor outside was pale and damp and going slowly gold at the east edge, the grass wet with last night's drizzle, the sky the particular grey becoming blue of a morning that has decided to be good. The path ahead was clear. At the edge of the town, where the houses end and the moor begins, the gate was already open. There was no one at the gate. There was no one anywhere on the path. The gate was simply open in the grey morning, and I walked through it, and I did not ask why, because I knew why. I had spent a whole night in the company of the reason, and some gifts you do not interrogate. Some doors you simply walk through gratefully and go. I am on the path now, in the early light. I am telling you this from the path, from the good damp of the morning air, from the particular clarity that only comes after a night. You did not sleep, but that somehow rested you anyway. The moor goes out on all sides in the pale gold, and there is no one on it, and the sky is doing that thing it does in the early morning when it cannot decide, yet between grey and blue, and chooses both. The workshop is behind me. The fire will burn low there through the day, tended by someone who will come and not announce themselves. The cauldron will sit still. It has finished what it came to do for this one night, and it will not begin again until the next. The grimoire on the table will wait, its pages turned to where they were turned. The lavender will go on drying slowly in the warm air that always seems to be in that room. And on the warm stone at the center of the floor, in the place where the heat pools deepest, a small black cat will be curled, nose tucked under, not sleeping, holding, as she has always been holding, as she will always be. Someone is awake with me in this last quiet hour. Not the cat, not her specifically, though in some sense it is always her. In every room I have ever sat in with a sleeping thing for company, someone else. Past the door I have just come through, past the path and the damp moor and the distance I cannot measure. Someone listening to this grey morning the same way I am listening to it, with their eyes not quite closed, with the warm not quite gone yet, with the particular held feeling of a story that has just finished and has not yet fully settled. I can feel it, the way you can feel a fire in the next room through a wall. You do not see it or hear it, but you feel the warmth coming through, and you know, I know, someone is awake with me. I am glad you are here. Sleep if you haven't yet. She'll mind the door. She always has. There is no room in all of Shinri where you are more safely held than the one you just heard about. And now you know it for exactly what it is, which is a gift not many travelers get. I have looked back. I told myself I would not, but I have. There is a lantern burning in the workshop window, small and brass and steady, the way a lantern is steady when it has been burning in the same window for 11 years and has no intention of stopping. It was there when I arrived, hours ago, before I understood what it meant. It is there still now, in the full morning light, burning against the day, because the night's returning is over, but the door is still, as it always is, open. The same lantern. I have seen it in other windows, other rooms, other places where someone has decided to be the light that the lost can navigate by, a pavilion on a long hill, an island at the edge of a bay, and now here at the edge of a grey moor in the early morning. I used to think they were different lanterns. I know better now. There is only ever one. There is only ever the one person willing to light it, and the lighting of it is the whole story every time. Somewhere tonight, a lantern was burning. For me, for someone. It was the same lantern.